And today, I'm going to lift up a passage of Scripture that just is a framing for us today. Very familiar to everyone, the 51st Psalm. And that 10th verse where David offers this, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." And so for our lecture and our time today, I want to deal with this idea of when ministry becomes an idol. When ministry becomes an idol. I'll begin this way. I have to tell you that there is a stubbornness in me. There's a stubbornness in me. I'm an Apple user. I'm not trying to evangelize. Please, no, I am not. I'm a stubborn user. Because often my iPhone wants to update, but I refuse to allow it to update. Because I'm always saying, I got enough on my iPhone. I don't need to update my iPhone. I've got took me a while even to get a new iPhone. I like the old kind of round. With the first one I had, I said, I got this one. I'm keeping it. It's fine. I don't need anything else. I am an absolutely stubborn user. But what I fail to understand is that each operating system, no matter how elegant, is flawed. There's always an update that says trying to fix some particular flaw. There has never been a perfect operating system. No matter how wonderful you may think it is, it always has some particular bugs. And one of the interesting things is that when you do not update, it then means that you cannot handle new software. That whatever new application has come into your purview, you can't use it. You may be able to use it, but it's going to take forever to upload. It's going to take forever to work through, because the update is what allows you to deal with new things. And because I'm a stubborn user, and because I refuse to update, if you had an iPhone 15 and whatever update, OS, whatever, I was working on the very first one for quite some time. And what happens is your phone gets caught in a loop. There are these little things that come up and begin to spin. And you look at them and you wonder, when are you going to stop spinning? But it continues to spin and never stops spinning. It eventually then will freeze or shut down. Either you're in a loop, you freeze, or you shut down. And I wish I had learned in my younger days of ministry that no matter where you first had your encounter with your calling, God continues to download new spiritual software in your spirit. That God is continuing to update and work with us and through us. And part of the problem for many of us is that we have confused called with calling. That we are in a calling, not that you have been called. Called is past tense and means it's done and you need no update. Calling means that there is a continual working, that God is continuing to use us. Called is past tense. It indicates a moment in history when our spirit encountered what cannot be fully described by our inadequate human utterance. When humans encounter the Holy Spirit and holy speech. Speech is not enough to communicate who God is and what we encountered. We use approximation. We use broken human language. Calling is present tense. It's a statement of continuous action. Calling indicates the work, witness, and encounter is ever evolving. And I hope that the person you are today is not the person you were 15 years ago. I hope that when you move from kindergarten, that you are not the same person when you move to 9th grade. Unfortunately, there are some people that stay frozen in a loop, that shut down because they say they are called and they don't have a calling. Calling is present tense. Now, within the West African language of the Zarma and the indigenous language of the Hopi, there is no word for called. There is no past tense because in those traditions, God is always working. You cannot be in the past tense because there is always a continual movement and action. That God is at work, that God didn't just create, God is creating. God is continuing to move. God is continuing to do work. And they believe in the present action, continual revealing of God, calling. I once thought I was called, not realizing that God is still calling me. I once thought my calling was my work, the preaching, the teaching, the pastoring, lecturing, serving, the list goes on. I placed ministry upon a pedestal where God never demanded the vocation to be placed. As a child, and as with all children, I was an exceptional observer. Every child is an amazing observer, but they are terrible interpreters. They can see, they can examine, and the brilliance of a writer by the name of Cole Arthur Riley states that we must learn that we are in a calling, that we are not called. And calling is more than work. It is how you live in the fleeting days that we are given on earth. I grew up as a PK. So I was observing my father and observing my mother, but I didn't have the interpretation skills. I thought that ministry was then go, do. That was ministry because I observed, but I didn't have the interpretation skills, nor did I have the language to even ask the right questions. I didn't understand. And it took me a while to understand that I'm not called, I'm in the midst of a calling. Otis today is not going to be the Otis of tomorrow. Otis yesterday is not the Otis of today. Calling is how, not just what you do in quote ministry, it's how you love yourself. It's how you love your family. It is how you love. Calling is this idea that God is continuing to work. Calling is your tenderness with elders. Calling is quiet moments with yourself. Calling is laughter at midnight. Calling is prayer in the morning. Calling is ultimately how you handle the cracks in your soul and the scars on your heart. Know this. This calling is eternal. I wish I had known this before my beard turned gray. I wish I had known this idea that we are in the midst of a calling. And I wish I had not fallen into the trap that many fall into in ministry, where ministry then becomes a form of idolatry. Just like my iPhone, we are functioning with an outdated operating system. This system was designed to handle your introductory class of ministry, but is not designed to handle all the things after you leave seminary. The truth is that we must face ourselves as purveyors of the word if we often replace and place ministry as an idol. The church becomes an idol. Preaching becomes an idol. We then begin to think through, how can I preach better? Nothing wrong with that, but then it becomes the focus. And then we become people who begin to attune our ears to amens and to what people say at the back of the church. You did a good job. Do you know when people tell you you did a good job, a lot of times they're lying, you know. And if we create an entire setup where our ministry is based upon sips of affirmation, we will then create an idol where we bow down and begin to shape our ministry for amens instead of a ministry where we are turning ourselves over to God. That becomes the challenge of when we talk about this idea of being an idol. So whether you are a minister, bishop and preacher, apostle, whatever the title that you may have, if you're a doctor or in the black church, all you have to do is just come into a church and you become doc at that moment, whatever it may be. That went over some people's heads. And we have drained the memory of these particular terms, and we have become addicts in reference to feeding and feeding ourselves for this affirmation and get a hit from someone who again affirms us in a particular moment. This is the idea of idolatry. It is a strange vocation where we struggle with our own spiritual schizophrenia. On one hand, we know that we have a calling. And then on another hand, we are dealing with our very human nature. We get excited about the idea of being invited. We get excited and we then have models of ministry of who we want to be like. And then we model ourselves off of these particular individuals. We then become copies of other people. And there's nothing wrong with emulation, but when you become a copy of someone else, there's a wonderful thing for people who are involved in the arts. Anybody watch Antique Roadshow? I like Antique Roadshow. Come on, Antique Roadshow. I like Antique Roadshow, especially when somebody finds a major find and they got some money and they're just blown away. But I was watching one day, and there was this woman who had this vase, and she was saying that I believe, based upon what we have here, that it's probably something that's worth a lot. And they thought it was from some particular ancient dynasty or something of that nature. And the person who was examining it says, yeah, this is a very, very good imitation. It is worth maybe about $20. And she said, I thought it was going to be worth at least $5,000. She says, no, here is the problem. Said, when these types of vases were made, you have the name of the person who made it on the outside. But when these vases were made, you always put the name on the inside. It was always on the interior. It was never on the exterior. And so often in preaching, we spend our time trying to imitate someone that we end up becoming a copy, and copies are always inferior to the original. Learning to be who you are and the voice that you have. Do not place anyone on a pedestal. It is important you can learn from others, but in no way do we want to create that form of idolatry. Now, if I may take some time to share, because I read this scripture today from this gentleman by the name of David. And David is a peculiar person. I've been having this running issue with David for about the last 25 years. Just really, I have issues with David. He's a peculiar individual. David, the grand patriarch of Israel, canonized as the pinnacle of Hebraic nobility, yet lives at the nexus of brokenness and blessing. The greatest king recorded in the annals of Jewish history, but there has to be a conjunction always next to his name. He is the vehicle of Israel's victory, the source at the same time of his family utter destruction and dysfunction. David is not a success or a failure, but David is a successful failure and a failed success. He is the picture of ministry of what one preacher says, he has horns and halos. And every human being, I love to say it this way, has horns and halos. Just catch me on the wrong day. The horns come out. But all of us have horns and halos. And before David offers this powerful psalm, he has to face his own particular proclivities. David is an issue. David is problematic. David is a problem. I got issues with this dude. He is a problem. Just read his story. He's got issues. If David were in the political realm today, we would use different language to describe David. David is a problem. He uses power in a particular way. And as a matter of fact, David is a horrific father, a terrible father. And I'll just leave it with that right there. And David uses his power in a particular way, and we must learn from David. Because one of the things that I think that is powerful about David, with all of his messed up brokenness and issues, is he writes this one psalm that almost, when I think about it, might redeem him, but then I get upset with him every time I start thinking about it. Because he had to face himself. He had to deal with his own internal demons. That's what this psalm is about. Look at what he does. Most of us want to proclaim privately between our heart and God. David proclaims publicly. Here's the OM3 translation. I got issues. Create in me a clean heart. He says that my sin is ever before me. He's talking about all of the things that he has done. And he is proclaiming this now publicly so other leaders will also understand that just because you have a position doesn't mean that you have principles. Let me say it again. Just because position does not mean that you are principled. It just means that you have privilege. And many times we confuse position and privilege as if we automatically have principles. But many times when we're placed in positions, we lose all principles and our moral compass is scrambled by the magnetic field of materialism. Is what happens in the process. And David issues this particular lament to himself. That's why I love David so very much. And this becomes the challenge for ministry today. Do we place ministry as an idol, refusing to work on the interior self? Refusing to deal with. Here's the thing. Everyone who preaches, though we place robes on, if we were to take them off, we would see the scars on our heart. Everyone is broken. Everyone is hurting. Everyone has some issues. Everyone has some family challenges. Now, if you get up there and you act as if I got it all together, you got some challenges there. Because all of us have these particular issues, and if we are not careful, we will place the ministry that we hold upon a pedestal and begin to bow down to it. I'm reminded of so many preachers that I remember my father sharing with me, of people who thought that the church was more important than anything else. And I have to thank my father. I'm so glad that my mother and father are still living there, 90 years young. They just turned 90 a few months ago, and they are doing well, they're healthy, and I'm able to just sit and have these wonderful conversations with them about what it's been like to be in a life in ministry. And one thing that I learned from my family, and my father shared with me, is that the idea of pastor and father was not an oxymoron to him. That he did not want his children developing in the way in which many PKs do, where they see a parent doing ministry work, but they've never seen a parent be a parent. Because the church was the child, the church was the favored child. The church became the spouse, the church became the family, and the family becomes a prop to place before the church, to say, here we are. And the reality is that many people would rather have a prop put before them than the reality and the messiness of what a family deals with. And part of our role in reference in this moment is to do the interior work and to understand that we come to the table, though God has moved in an amazing and wonderful way, we come to the table through all of the messiness, pain, and challenges of our own experience that we don't talk about. There are certain things that we won't preach about or things that we can't tolerate because of our own particular experience. And there are things that we have to face ourselves so that God may create in us a clean heart and renew within us a right spirit. It's a wonderful poet by the name of Rudy Francisco who talks about the idea that we have to learn how to face ourselves, to do the interior work. The poem states this: "There was a time in my life when I couldn't tell the difference between a mirror and a window. I could stand in front of either and see everything but myself." Can we face ourselves? The great Howard Thurman says it this way, that I think is one of the most profound questions that he raises when he gives this meditation. He says, when was the last time you had a good session with yourself? When was the last time you had a conversation with your spirit and with your soul? Ministry demands this idea, and it demands that we deepen the interior work. Otherwise, you will come to a conference looking for a fix. You will come to the conference looking for the next sermon. You will come to the conference looking for the next thing that you can put in place in church, in ministry, to make your church grow. What if your calling is not in a space of numerical growth? What if you have been called in a space of spiritual growth? And here is the thing, the model that we have is a capitalistic model. We lift up someone who has numbers but may not have principles. We have to recognize we have placed it as an idol. There has to be the interior work. Now, two of my favorite preachers ever to preach, Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr. Howard Thurman, at the peak of his ministry, never preached to more than maybe 75 to 150 people. One of the most influential theological minds of the 20th century. Never was involved in mega anything. If you ever have the opportunity to go to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church at the height of Dr. King's popularity, not more than 150 to 200 people showed up to the church, and they were planning to put him out before he was assassinated. He dealt with the pain of pastoring and also the pain of pastoring a nation at the same time. We often place a market model on ministry, and that becomes our model. And it doesn't make any sense because that model's not biblical. Jesus had a congregation of 12, and we know one was not that great. He had a small congregation of people, but in that small group of individuals, in that small group of people, that unnamed people, he was able to transform the world. But soon as we have an empire framing of ministry, we start look at the market model. How large is it? And you know, when you go to these conferences, it's fascinating to me. This is what, and this happens on the male side, I think more so. Everybody's always giving how large is your congregation? And this is what I love to do. Anytime you hear a brother telling you how large their congregation is, always cut it in half. Just 50%, whatever they say, just cut it by 50. That's it. And you probably got a more accurate number at that point. Because they're always just going to, because it becomes this idea of the demonstration of what can be seen physically then validates who I am. And then also what validates is then where I've preached. I go to, I'm not going to mention this, some of the conferences, and they will tell you who they preach for. I preached for so-and-so and did this, that, and the other as a validation, because when you are deeply insecure, because here's the truth is, many people in ministry are deeply insecure. Introverts with some extroverted skills. You know you're wiped out after talking to people for a while, like, whoo. And so we have these particular insecurities that we have to learn how to face. And here's the beautiful thing, that the calling is that God is saying, I'm calling you with all of these issues because I want to use you. I'm not looking for the one who fits so well on social media. Social media just cracks me up because everybody looks so perfect. And what I found, there was a wonderful documentary that talked about what's in the frame and what's outside the frame, and how many times they have to shoot something to get the perfect light, and then the filter, you know. But we have to do the internal work. That's what the calling is about. And that's what we live in, a moment where we don't have a good session with ourselves. And we are fearful of the brokenness of who we are. David, who was a terrible father. David, who used his power to harm and abuse, but is then also canonized as a great leader, but is also canonized as a horrific human being, but is also canonized. He's lifted up on both ends. And I like what Walter Brueggemann says, talking about David's truth, is the necessity that they do something within the Hebraic tradition, where every other tradition scrubs people's biography. So if you are the Babylonian king and the Assyrian king, if you are the Caesar of Rome, you scrub someone's biography. But within the Hebraic tradition, the Jewish tradition, they say we don't scrub biographies. We let you see the fullness of who they are, the flaws and the faithfulness, the blessings and the brokenness, the scars and the shouts, the totality of who they are. This is the beauty of what we're called to, that we are not called to perfection, but to faithfulness. And when we come to that moment, it releases a whole lot of stress. I remember began ministry here in Georgia, in Augusta, GA, home of James Brown. Shout out to James Brown. At Tabernacle Baptist Church, and every Sunday I was absolutely a wreck. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure out, I got to preach the breast sermon this Sunday. I've got to do this, I'm working my butt off, and then I would fail every Sunday, and I'm depressed and whatnot. And then my best friend, my wife, Monica, says, Otis, you do know you have next week, right? She would always remind me, say, you messed up this week, you got next week. So keep working at it. You'll get better at it. You just keep working at it. It's like, thanks. I thought I was going to get some affirmation. It was good. It's like, no, you're not. It wasn't good. but you have potential. You have next week. And having people in your life who love you enough to tell you the truth will bless your life on multiple levels. When we place our ministry on this pedestal, it is destructive to us. And so one of the things that we must learn in ministry, and I forgive my sports analogies because I love sports, is part of the problem is in terms of how we develop. Every one of us develop a particular way. Theologically, we develop in a certain way in terms of the region that we're from. All these things develop who we are. And so I use the example that what happens when you play basketball and you can only dribble one way. If you can only dribble with your right hand, you will always get trapped by the opponents because they know you can't go left. But that is why anyone who knows about basketball, there's something called a crossover. You've got to be able to go from your right to your left. And the fundamental question for ministry today is that we have to learn our spiritual and theological crossover. You developed with the right hand with your evangelical theology. You developed with your right hand, you got some Barth and your Niebuhr. You developed your right hand, you got some Orthodox and your Fosdick. But you've got to learn your left hand. You need some Cone and also some Weems. You need some, on your left hand, you need some Lewis and also some Dr. Williams. You've got to be able to cross over theologically so that you can move from one space to another space. And when you learn how to cross over, then you can find the holes in the defense and make your way to the net. That's the beauty of it. But unfortunately, we would rather focus on our dominant hand, and then we are weak in reference to the other hand. This is what it means to be a part of a calling. You are here at the Festival of Homiletics, and God is trying to help us with our crossover so that you can move from the theological framing that you are comfortable with to so you can cross over on the other hand. I believe in Allen Iverson moves. That theologically, you should be able to go back and forth. That's why I love Steph Curry so very much. Steph Curry is a magician when it comes to the ball. And I was really upset that he got hurt. Anyway, for those of you who are watching the playoffs, but anyway, that's a whole other story. But what is so powerful about Steph Curry that no one mentions, he's unlike any other star that plays basketball. He is the greatest shooter that we have ever seen. But this is what the coach Steve Kerr says. What is so powerful about Steph Curry is that he doesn't need the ball in his hands. He is more dangerous without the ball. This is why. And next time you watch any clips from Golden State Warriors, he runs around the court without the ball. And everybody does this because they're always worried about him without the ball, which means he ends up blessing his teammates who have the ball. When you have certain skills, you should use them in such a way so the eyes are not always on you, but so you end up blessing other people in the process so that they can make their way to the net. That's the beauty. But when we make ministry an idol, we want to be the center of attention. We think that the church only moves because of us. We think that the ministry is about us. Guess what? And my wife, she said this. She says, you know, when you die, they're going to have a nice funeral and they're going to forget about you in a few weeks after that. And then they're going to get a new pastor. I said, that's true. She said, you just need to know that. Just be faithful. Right. Be faithful in the space that you have been given. Right. It doesn't all rest on you. And unfortunately, people stay in ministry too long because they think the church is about them. And they feel that, and their identity is connected to what they do instead of who they are. And when that happens, ministry becomes an idol to you. So what do we do when we recognize that these things that ministry becomes an idol in such a way? I would say it this way, that I found from a wonderful tradition within the Japanese culture, this tradition called Kintsugi. Kintsugi is the tradition of taking that which is broken and bringing it together. Now, the story of Kintsugi is that there was an emperor who had some gift. I believe it was from China. It was literally China, from China, that this gift was given to this gentleman, and pieces of this pottery was broken. And he was so upset, they said, we need to send it back to China. And when they sent it back to China, they did fix it, but they stapled pieces together. It was absolutely ugly. And there was a Buddhist priest who said, just give me the broken pieces. And what the priest did is that he took the broken pieces and he took them to his shop. And he took little pieces of gold along with the sap from the irishi tree. And that sap from the irishi tree along with the gold, he began to put the pieces together. But instead of painting over the pieces where the cracks came together to make it look like it never cracked, he left the spaces where the pieces of the pottery were broken so you could see where it was broken. And here's the fascinating thing about Kintsugi, is that it is worth more after it's broken because of the gold that's placed in between. But there's another thing that made me shout about Kintsugi, is that the irishi tree, which has the sap that is used to bring the broken pieces together, that in Japan, they also say that the sap is the blood. That if you have some of the blood that comes from a tree from the highest mountains in Japan, that if you allow that blood to cover the broken pieces and place a little gold in that space, it brings things together and brings a beauty, but at the same time shares a story. It's interesting that we use the terminology of the blood, that the blood covers all the brokenness, the blood covers all the pieces and brings us back together. I believe that every preacher is a Kintsugi piece of art, that we are the ones who have been broken, and that if we allow the cracks to show, if we allow those spaces that God has placed together, we end up blessing people in the process. And the beautiful thing about a Kintsugi piece of art is it's a reminder of what it used to be. It's a reminder of how, in the hands of the right person, what everybody else said should be thrown away can be brought back together again. So I thank God here at Peachtree Road, United Methodist Church, I look out and I see all of the Kintsugi people, all of the broken pieces that have been brought back together. And when those pieces are brought back together, guess what? They're brought together, but they are an empty vessel waiting to be filled. And all of us as preachers are empty vessels waiting to be filled, that we have a calling from our God. Not called, but calling. That we've got to work the interior work, not the exterior. And in the process, as we evolve, God's going to keep downloading some new software in your spirit. And there are things that you didn't think you could handle last year that you're going to have an easy time dealing with this year. May God bless you. May God keep you. And may you be unafraid to show the cracks. And when people say you look broken, just tell them, Kintsugi. God bless you. I'm going to do the best that I can to, yes, for a Q&A. There's a microphone?
Okay. Yeah. Questions? Any questions?
Oh, no questions? Oh, okay.
It's not a question so much as a comment, which feels disrespectful, but I'm struck by it's not just called versus calling, it's call, because I'm afraid to protect my current call, and it may cause me to deny my calling.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful statement. So very true. We operate in a very peculiar space that most people have no idea or any understanding. They just think it's a resume that we submitted. When there's something deep inside of us that we wrestle with all the time that we can't let go. We're literally, it allows us to breathe. And that becomes the challenge. And when we are in our calling and accepting our call, we must be willing to go into territory that we fear. Because that may be the space where God is doing some amazing work. Now, here is the thing that was shared with me by an elder. Sometimes you are given multiple opportunities, and God can bless you in the comfort of this, and God can bless you in the danger of this. But where you are comfortable may put you in a distance from the closeness of God. so you get to hear the echo, but not the original voice. And that becomes the question. Do we want the echoes, or do we want the whisper in our ear? And some people will live their life with the echo. And here is the interesting thing about an echo. It has everything of the whisper, but it does not have the full resonance. It doesn't have the weight of the whisper. It's a dissipated whisper. And that many times is what we deal with. You want an echo, or do you want to hear the fullness of the whisper of God? And those are the choices that are given before us.
We have a couple of online questions.
Hey, online people, wherever you are.
Okay, the first one is, how do we pastor congregation members that make church an idol?
Ooh, oh, that's good. You know what? Every church has someone who places the church as an idol. And one of the challenges is, I will just share some stories and do it this way. There was a particular individual that I had the privilege of pastoring some years ago. Might have been one of the meanest people I've ever met in my life. No, I'm really, all of you all know this person because they're in your congregation. You know what I'm talking about, right? And this was a very rule-centric person. This was, you have to do it this way, and we are the leading church. I don't know what that meant. I know we were in a race, I was like, but we're the leading church. We have to do X, Y, and Z. I was so frustrated with the person, challenged by the person, and was always in conflict. And that person was creating conflict consistently and making my life a living hell. Wow. Until a family member told me their childhood. And my heart broke for why they live the way they do. And when my heart broke for them, instead of it being about me, I now had the opportunity to minister to someone because I had some of their biography. And I knew that the reason that they're doing this is because of some serious trauma from their childhood. That's why they speak to people the way that they do, because they're fearful of letting people in. Yes. And the moment I learned that it changed the way that I ministered. So what happened was, I was changed by their ministry. Instead of me thinking that I could change them, they changed me. And I became a better pastor because I knew their story instead of thinking that I was a victim and they just need to act right. And we'll have a better church if they just act right. But many times, people are placed in our lives so that we can be transformed instead of us thinking that we have the ability to transform people. And that's one of the ways to learn the power of the position of pastoring, is that we are constantly being changed in this calling that we have. But learning people's story will change the way that we interact with people, and will also give you an entryway to help the church not see the ministry as an idol.
We have another online question. What is your advice about pastors taking sabbatical?
Do it. Yo, do it. As often as you can. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. There's a necessity. Burnout is real. And everyone should take a sabbatical. And again, that goes to this idolatry piece, that we think that things can't function without us. And then we pour into people that there's an idolatry. Well, what if you're not here? What will happen? Well, guess what? The sun will rise, the sun will set. Things will continue on. Life will continue on. But in order for us to survive, no, let me say that again. In order for us to thrive, we have to take sabbatical. God took a sabbatical, said, all right, I'm done. It's seventh day, I'm out. So God said, I got to take a sabbatical. That's what it was. I'm rest. It was Saturday, wasn't it? Sabbatical, Sabbath. So God says, take a sabbatical. So if God rests, who you think you are? That we don't need to rest? That's insane. Let me get a little sports piece on this one. So I love sports, as I mentioned to you before. So every off season, every sports team has an off season. They said you can't do this all year. They get a sabbatical. They train and rework. Now, the one group that doesn't have an off season, and I'm a fan of the WNBA. The WNBA is summertime is their American season, but because they're not paid enough, they then have to go to Europe to play, so they play all year round. And in the process, that's why you don't have longevity of women athletes, because they end up injuring themselves because they're not given sabbaticals like men are given. So we have to begin to recognize that everybody needs rest. When the winter comes, I love that the fact that the bear says, I'm taking a sabbatical. It's called hibernation. I'm chilling for a while because I've got to be ready, for the time period when I'm supposed to work. So everything in nature takes a sabbatical, but the ignorance of human beings. We're the only thing in creation that says we don't need rest. So yeah, whoever's online, take a sabbatical. Do your thing. Do your thing.
One more, I think we have time for one more question. Mm-hmm. And that is, how do we hold on 1 second. How can we redirect our people away from the market value of the church? Thinking of the church as market value.
Absolutely. Oh, that's good. That's good. Redirecting the market away from the market value, I believe, begins in becoming Christ-centric with the gospel. Jesus is always pushing us away from the empire framing of our faith. And sabbatical is helpful too. Learning how to rest and learning how to just become Christ-centered, gospel-centric in the way in which we flow, where Jesus is not focused on the numbers. Paul can a little bit be number-centric, but Jesus is not focused on the numbers. It's about being faithful over a few things. It's about spending a whole lot of time with one woman at the well and having a conversation more with this one individual, not about the masses. It's about being interrupted as you're going to one house that a rabbi is asking you to come by and visit his child that is dying, but then a woman who just touches the hem of a garment, this focus on one. Even when you got 10 lepers, only one comes back and says thank you. There is this emphasis not on the largeness of numbers. That's an Americanized idea. This internal and focus on what can happen when the one is blessed. And it becomes this idea of that we're not looking at numbers, market. It's about being settled in the calling. When you are in a small space, I use Fannie Lou Hamer today. Sunflower, Mississippi. Most people never heard of it. She was committed to her calling in Sunflower, Mississippi. And because she was committed to that calling in Sunflower, Mississippi, she changed the world. If you want to be global, be local first. Your locality will bless people universally. Be specific to the space that you're in, and something unique can happen in the process. And it shifts our value system in that manner when we are local and when we recognize the one. Christ-centered nature. Yeah. That's a great question.
Thank you, Otis.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.